Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the stars drift past through the main viewing screen. His ship had been exploring the outer rim for 3 months now, and they had found nothing but empty space and dead rocks. The crew was getting restless, and Morrison could not blame them. Deep space exploration was supposed to be exciting, but most of the time it was just boring. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez looked up from her station with a frown on her face. She was the ship's tactical officer and one of the best Morrison had ever worked with. Her dark eyes showed concern as she checked her readings again. "Captain, we are getting something strange on long-range sensors," she said. "It looks like a transmission, but it is coming from everywhere at once." Morrison walked over to her station and looked at the display. The readings made no sense. The signal was not coming from any single point in space, but seemed to be appearing throughout the entire galaxy at the same time. That should have been impossible with any known technology. "Can you clean it up?" Morrison asked. "Already trying, sir," Rodriguez replied. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she worked to isolate the signal. "This is unlike anything I have seen before. The transmission is being sent on every frequency we can detect." Sergeant Ben Parker looked up from the engineering station. He was a big man with calloused hands who knew more about ship systems than anyone Morrison had ever met. His face showed the same confusion as Rodriguez. "Captain, the signal is not just radio waves," Parker said. "It is affecting our quantum communication array and even our navigation systems. Whatever is sending this has technology far beyond anything we have." Morrison felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Humanity had been expanding into space for over a century now, and they had never encountered another intelligent species. The possibility that they might not be alone had always existed, but most people had stopped thinking about it. "Put it on." "The main screen," Morrison ordered. The viewing screen flickered and then filled with an image that made everyone on the bridge take a step back. A massive figure appeared before them, standing at least 12 feet tall. Its body seemed to be made of pure light and energy that shifted and moved like liquid fire. Multiple eyes glowed along what might have been its head, and when it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Supreme Hierarch Zalthis of the Ethereal Dominion," the being said. Its voice was deep and resonated through the ship's hull as if the metal itself was vibrating. "For 10,000 years we have ruled this galaxy as gods among the lesser species. We have brought order to chaos and meaning to the void." Morrison exchanged glances with his crew. The being's words were being translated automatically by their systems, but the implications were staggering. This creature was claiming to rule most of the known galaxy. "We have detected a new species expanding beyond their birth system without seeking our divine permission," Zalthis continued. "You call yourselves humans, and you have spread to 17 star systems in defiance of cosmic law. This transgression cannot be allowed to continue." The image shifted and showed scenes of destruction that made Morrison's blood run cold. Entire planets had been reduced to floating debris. Star systems that had once supported life were now empty, graveyards drifting in space. The scale of devastation was beyond anything humanity had ever imagined. "These are the fates of species who defied our divine will," the hierarch said. "The Kethran Empire thought their billion ships could challenge gods. The Vortaki Collective believed their technology made them our equals. The Zephyrian Commonwealth trusted in their ancient wisdom. All now serve as examples of what happens to those who forget their place." Rodriguez gripped her console until her knuckles turned white. Parker had gone pale and was staring at the screen with wide eyes. Morrison forced himself to remain calm even though his heart was racing. This being was threatening to destroy humanity, just like it had destroyed countless other civilizations. "Your species will acknowledge our divinity and submit to our will, as all others have done," Zalthis declared. "You will dismantle your military forces and accept ethereal governors on all your worlds. Your people will worship us as the true gods of this galaxy and provide tribute as we see fit. The hierarch raised what might have been an arm, and energy crackled around its form. You have 30 of your solar days to comply with these demands. If you refuse, we will dispatch our god fleet to demonstrate the price of defiance. Your species will learn to kneel before true divinity, or it will cease to exist entirely. Foe. Transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Morrison looked at his crew and saw his own shock reflected in their faces. In the span of 5 minutes, their understanding of the universe had been completely overturned. Humanity was not alone, and the beings they had encountered claimed to be gods who ruled through fear and destruction. Rodriguez set course for Earth maximum speed, Morrison ordered. His voice was steady, despite the turmoil in his mind. Parker, I want every scrap of power you can give us. We need to get home and warn everyone about what is coming. Yes, sir. Both, officers replied. As the USS Defiance turned toward home, Morrison stared at the stars and wondered if humanity would still exist in 30 days. They were about to face beings who called themselves gods and had the power to back up their claims. The question was whether human courage and determination would be enough to stand against divine wrath. The USS Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, and Morrison immediately knew that Earth had received the same transmission. Military ships were moving in formations he had never seen before, and construction. Drones swarmed around the orbital shipyards like angry insects. Humanity was preparing for war. Admiral Lisa Carter's face appeared on the main screen before Morrison had even requested communication. She was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. Her expression was grim as she looked at Morrison through the screen. Commander Morrison. I am glad to see you made it back safely, she said. Report to Earth Command immediately. We have a lot to discuss and very little time to do it. Yes, Admiral, Morrison replied. What is our current situation? Bad and getting worse, Carter said bluntly. The ethereal transmission reached every human colony at the same time. We have confirmed reports from 60 star systems, all saying the same thing. These beings want total surrender, or they will destroy us all. Morrison felt his heart sink. He had hoped that maybe the transmission had been limited to his sector, but it seemed the entire human sphere had been threatened. What are we going to do, Admiral? We are going to fight, Carter said with steel in her voice. I have called an emergency session of the Colonial Council. Every leader from every human world is coming to Earth. We will decide our response together. 2. Hours later, Morrison found himself in the largest conference room on Earth Command Station. Representatives from all 60 human colonies were present either in person or through holographic projection. The room buzzed with nervous energy as politicians and military leaders argued among themselves. We cannot fight beings who claim to be gods, said Governor Williams from the Centauri system. He was a small, nervous man who kept wiping sweat from his forehead. They have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. They must have weapons and technology beyond our understanding. So we should just surrender, asked General Hayes from the Mars Defense Force. She was a tall woman with short red hair and a voice that could cut through steel. Give up everything our ancestors worked for because some aliens tell us to kneel. Dr. Kevin Walsh stood up from his position near the front of the room. He was Earth's leading expert on alien life forms, even though until today no alien life had ever been found. His thin frame and wild gray hair made him look like a mad scientist, but Morrison knew his mind was one of the sharpest in human space. I have been studying the transmission for the past 12 hours, Walsh said. These ethereal beings are certainly powerful, but I do not believe they are actually gods. Their energy signatures suggest they are biological entities using extremely advanced technology. What difference does that make? Governor Williams demanded. Gods or not, they can destroy entire star systems. The difference is that technology can be understood and countered, Walsh replied. If they were truly divine beings, then we would have no hope. But if they are using technology, no matter how advanced, then we might be able to find weaknesses. Admiral Carter stood, and the room fell silent. She commanded respect from everyone present, and when she spoke, people listened. Dr. Walsh is correct. These beings may call themselves gods, but they are still bound by the laws of physics. The question is whether we have the courage to stand up to them. Courage will not stop their weapons from destroying our worlds, Governor Williams said. Maybe not, Carter replied. But surrendering certainly will not save them either. Look at what they did to the other species who submitted. Those civilizations are now slaves, serving their conquerors for eternity. Is that really a better fate than fighting for our freedom? Morrison found himself thinking about the images of destroyed worlds from the transmission. The ethereals had wiped out entire species who had defied them, but they had also enslaved those who surrendered. Either path led to the end of human independence. What do you propose, Admiral? Asked President Chen from the Luna colony. We upgrade our weapons and prepare our defenses, Carter said. We have 30 days to turn our exploration fleet into a military force capable of fighting gods. It will not be easy, but it is our only chance. The debate continued for hours, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would not surrender. They would face the ethereal god fleet and either win their freedom or die trying. Morrison felt a surge of pride in his species as he watched the representatives sign the Declaration of Defiance. Over the following weeks, Earth became a hive of activity. The shipyards worked around the clock to retrofit civilian vessels with military weapons. Scientists labored to develop new technologies based on their analysis of the ethereal transmission. Soldiers trained for battles they could barely imagine. The USS Valiant was selected as the flagship for humanity's defense. She was the newest and most advanced ship in the fleet, with experimental weapons and shields that had never been tested in combat. Captain Steve Collins took command with Morrison serving as his first officer. Collins was younger than Morrison, but had a reputation as a tactical genius. His black hair was already showing gray at the temples despite his age, and his blue eyes seemed to see possibilities that others missed. If anyone could find a way to fight gods, it would be him. The key is not to think of them as gods, Collins told his senior staff during their first briefing. They have advanced technology, but technology has limitations. Every weapon has a weakness, and every defense can be overcome. We just need to find the right approach. Long-range sensors detected the approaching ethereal fleet when there were still 5 days left until the deadline. The readings were terrifying. Massive ships that seemed to bend space around them were moving toward Earth at impossible speeds. Energy signatures that defied analysis poured from vessels the size of small moons. But Morrison noticed something in the sensor data that gave him hope. The ethereal ships were following predictable courses and maintaining standard formations. For all their power, they were still operating according to tactical principles that humans could understand. They may call themselves gods, Morrison said to Collins as they studied the sensor readings. But they fight like mortals. The ethereal god fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, like something from humanity's darkest nightmares. Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant, watching the long-range sensors as massive shapes appeared on the display. The lead vessel was so large that it registered as a small moon rather than a ship. Captain Collins studied the readings with calm focus while the bridge crew worked at their stations. Morrison could see the tension in everyone's movements, but their training held firm. These were the best officers in the human fleet, and they would not break under pressure. Analysis, Dr. Brooks, Collins asked. Chief Science Officer Dr. Nina Brooks looked up from her console with wide eyes. She was a young woman with brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail, but her mind was one of the sharpest in human space. Her voice was steady despite what she was seeing. The flagship is approximately 800 kilometers long and 300 wide, she reported. Its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. The readings suggest it is manipulating space-time around itself to achieve faster-than-light travel without entering hyperspace. What about weapons? Morrison asked. Unknown, sir, Brooks replied. I am detecting massive energy buildups throughout the vessel, but I cannot determine their purpose. The smaller ships appear to be escorts crewed by different species. Their technology is more conventional, but still beyond our current capabilities. Collins nodded and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. The ethereal fleet has arrived, and we are about to make first contact with beings who claim to be gods. Remember that we are here to defend humanity and our right to exist as free people. Whatever happens today, we will face it with courage. The communication board lit up as an incoming transmission arrived from the ethereal flagship. The main screen filled with the image of a being even more imposing than the one they had seen in the original message. This creature stood 15 feet tall with energy crackling around its form like controlled lightning. When it spoke, its voice seemed to shake the very walls of the ship. I am War Hierarch Velnoxus, commander of the Divine Retribution and Herald of Cosmic Justice, the being announced. Your pathetic species has had 30 days to acknowledge ethereal divinity and submit to our will. Have you prepared your surrender? Captain Collins stepped forward, and Morrison felt a surge of pride as his captain faced down a being that claimed to be a god. Collins showed no fear as he looked directly at the towering figure on the screen. I'm Captain Steve Collins of the Terran Defense Force, he said in a clear, strong voice. Humanity rejects your demands for surrender. We are a free people, and we will remain free. No one has the right to rule over others without their consent. Velnoxus seemed genuinely surprised by the response. The energy around his form flickered and pulsed as if he could not believe what he had heard. You dare to defy divine will, mortal. No species has refused submission for over 3 centuries. Do you not understand what we are? We understand that you are beings with advanced technology who use fear to control others, Collins replied. That does not make you gods. It makes you tyrants. The War Hierarch's form blazed with anger, and the transmission cut off abruptly. Morrison watched as the tactical display showed the ethereal fleet moving into attack formation. Energy readings spiked throughout the enemy vessels as they prepared to demonstrate their power. All ships maintain formation and prepare for combat. Collins ordered over the fleet communication channel. The human force was pitifully small compared to the ethereal armada, but they would not retreat. Remember the plan and trust in your training. The USS Valiant led a formation of 20 human warships toward the God Fleet. The vessels had been hastily converted from exploration ships and cargo haulers, but they carried the most advanced weapons humanity could produce. Quantum torpedoes and antimatter beam arrays had never been tested in actual combat, but today they would face their ultimate trial. Dr. Brooks monitored her sensors as they approached the enemy formation. Captain, I am detecting massive energy buildup in the Divine Retribution. Whatever they are preparing, it is drawing power from their entire fleet. All ships evasive maneuvers, Collins ordered. The space around the Divine Retribution twisted, and a beam of pure destruction lanced out toward the human formation. The destroyer USS Courage was caught in the blast and simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, and the next there was nothing but empty space. No debris, no energy signature, nothing at all. Morrison felt his blood run cold as he realized what they were facing. These beings could literally erase matter from existence with their weapons. The crew around him stared in shock at the place where their comrades had been just seconds before. But Collins remained focused on his instruments, and Morrison saw something that gave him hope. Dr. Brooks, did you catch that energy pattern? Yes. Sir, Brooks replied excitedly. The weapon required a massive charge time and left their primary systems vulnerable for nearly 30 seconds. They may be powerful, but they are not invincible. All ships target the divine retribution, Collins ordered. Quantum torpedoes full spread. The human weapons struck the ethereal flagship, and Morrison held his breath as he waited to see the results. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen, and he feared their weapons were useless against divine technology. Then Dr. Brooks shouted in amazement, "Direct hit, sir! Their shields are down to 80%. The bridge erupted in cheers as the crew realized what had happened. Human weapons had actually damaged a godship. The beings who claimed divine status could be hurt by mortal technology. Morrison watched the tactical display as the battle continued. The human ships were vastly outnumbered, but they had learned something crucial. The ethereals were not invincible. They could be fought, and they could be beaten. For the first time since the original transmission, Morrison began to believe that humanity might actually survive this encounter. The beings who called themselves gods had just proven that they could bleed. Word of the USS Valiant's successful attack on the divine retribution spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. On 1,000 worlds, species that had worshipped the ethereals for generations watched their communication networks light up with impossible news. The gods could bleed. Morrison monitored the long-range communications array as reports flooded in from across the ethereal dominion. On the mining world of Keftar, the slave workers had stopped their digging and were staring at the sky. In the Teu Vortaki home system, massive crowds gathered in the ruins of their ancient cities. The Zephyrian survivors on their orbital habitats were transmitting messages of hope for the first time in centuries. "Captain, we are receiving over 10,000 transmissions from across the galaxy," reported Communications Officer Lieutenant Ryan Foster. He was a young man with keen eyes who had served on exploration vessels before the war. Most of them are asking the same question. Did humans really damage an ethereal godship? Captain Collins smiled grimly as he studied the tactical display. The divine retribution was still functional, but its shields were definitely weakened. More importantly, the other ethereal vessels were no longer maintaining their perfect formations. For the first time in millennia, they were showing uncertainty. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Collins ordered. "Tell them that humanity stands against tyranny and that no being has the right to claim dominion over others. The age of false gods is ending." War Hierarch Velnoxus appeared on the main screen again, but this time his energy form was flickering with what looked like rage. The crackling lights around his massive frame pulsed erratically, and his multiple eyes blazed with fury. "You have made a grave error, mortals," he snarled. "You have wounded divine flesh, and for that transgression your entire species will suffer eternally. I will not simply destroy your worlds. I will ensure that every human experiences agony beyond imagination before death claims them." Morrison watched as the ethereal fleet began moving toward Earth at maximum speed. Energy readings spiked throughout their vessels as they prepared to unleash their full power against humanity's home world. The godships no longer cared about demonstrating their superiority. They wanted revenge. "All ships fall back toward Earth," Collins ordered. "Execute Plan Omega." The human fleet retreated, but not in panic. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and every captain knew their role. The USS Valiant led the formation back toward the inner system, while the ethereal god fleet pursued them with divine wrath. Dr. Brooks monitored her sensors as the enemy ships revealed more of their advanced technology. "Captain, they are opening what appear to be rifts in space-time. Some of their vessels are moving through folded space to outflank us." Morrison had studied the tactical reports, and he knew this was expected. The ethereals could manipulate space itself to achieve impossible maneuvers. But Collins had prepared for that possibility, too. "Launch gravity mines," Collins ordered. The human ships deployed their secret weapons as they retreated. The mines were experimental devices that created artificial gravity wells in space. When the ethereal vessels emerged from their spatial rifts, they found themselves caught in gravitational anomalies that disrupted their movement. Lieutenant Commander Foster coordinated the tactical network as information flowed between human ships. All vessels are reporting successful mine deployment. Enemy formation is breaking up as they try to avoid the gravity wells. The battle moved into the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, where humanity had prepared additional surprises. Hidden weapon platforms activated as the God Fleet approached, launching swarms of missiles and energy beams at the ethereal vessels. Morrison watched as several of the smaller escort ships took damage from the ambush. These vessels were crewed by species that the ethereals had conquered and enslaved. When their ships were disabled, human rescue teams moved in to evacuate the crews. "Captain, we are receiving surrender signals from multiple escort vessels," Foster reported. "They are requesting permission to join our fleet." Collins did not hesitate. "Grant their requests and integrate them into our formation. Anyone who stands against tyranny is welcome in our ranks." The tide of battle was turning as more enslaved species switched sides. These crews had been forced to serve the ethereals for generations, but seeing their gods bleed had given them hope for freedom. Human technology was shared freely with the new allies as the combined fleet grew stronger. Dr. Brooks made another crucial discovery as she analyzed the sensor data. "Captain, I am detecting biological signatures inside the ethereal energy forms. They are not pure energy beings as they appear. They are wearing some kind of technological suit that creates their godlike appearance." Morrison felt his heart race as he realized the implications. If the ethereals were biological creatures, then they could be killed by conventional means. Their divine appearance was just an illusion created by advanced technology. "Transmit that information to all ships," Collins ordered. "Make sure every gunner knows they are shooting at mortals wearing fancy armor." The psychological effect was immediate. Human weapons fire became more accurate as the crews realized they were fighting enhanced beings rather than true gods. The mystique of ethereal invincibility crumbled as more ships in their fleet took damage. Velnoxus seemed to sense the change in momentum because his next transmission was filled with desperate fury. "You cannot defeat divine will mortals. We have ruled this galaxy since before your species learned to make fire. We are eternal, and you are nothing but insects. Insects with very sharp stingers," Collins replied calmly. The war hierarch cut the transmission, and Morrison watched as the divine retribution began charging its reality-shredding weapon again. This time the target was clearly Earth itself. The ethereals intended to destroy humanity's home world as an example to the rest of the galaxy. "All ships protect Earth at all costs," Collins broadcast to the combined human and allied fleet. "Today we prove that free peoples can stand against any tyrant no matter how powerful they claim to be." Morrison gripped his console as the USS Valiant led the charge toward the divine retribution. Around them, dozens of ships from multiple species flew together, united in their determination to end the age of false gods. The final battle was about to begin. The final battle for Earth began in the shadow of Luna as the divine retribution moved into position to destroy humanity's home world. Morrison watched the tactical display show the massive god ship charging its reality-shredding weapon while human and allied vessels swarmed around it like angry wasps attacking a giant. War hierarch Velnoxus transmitted one final message to the human fleet. His energy form was flickering more violently now, and Morrison could see cracks appearing in his divine facade. "I challenge your strongest vessel to single combat mortal. Let us end this charade and demonstrate the futility of defying true gods, Captain." Collins did not hesitate in his response. "Challenge accepted. The USS Valiant will face your flagship alone." Morrison felt his heart sink at the captain's words. The divine retribution was hundreds of times larger than their ship and carried weapons that could erase matter from existence. It seemed like suicide to face such a vessel in single combat. but Collins had not survived his career by making reckless decisions. As the other human ships pulled back, he activated a private communication channel to Admiral Carter. "Admiral, is the Omega Protocol ready?" "All systems are green, Captain," Carter replied from Earth Command. "You have full authorization to proceed, Morrison." Realized that Collins had been planning this moment from the beginning. The challenge to single combat was not about honor or bravery. It was about getting close enough to the divine retribution to execute whatever secret plan humanity had developed. The USS Valiant approached the massive god ship while Velnoxus charged his ultimate weapon. Energy readings spiked throughout. The divine retribution as it prepared to fire the reality shredder that would tear a hole in space itself. Morrison could feel the power building even through their shielding. "All hands prepare for Omega Protocol," Collins announced over the ship. Wide communication system. "We are about to show the galaxy what happens when mortals refuse to kneel before false gods." Dr. Brooks worked frantically at her station as the final seconds counted down. "Captain, the weapon will fire in 30 seconds, whatever we are going. To do it has to be now." Collins activated the Omega Protocol, and Morrison watched in amazement as their ship underwent a complete transformation. Hidden weapons systems emerged from concealed bays while the hull itself began to glow with contained energy. The USS Valiant had been built as more than just a warship. It was humanity's ultimate weapon disguised as a simple cruiser. "All ships, commence final attack," Collins broadcast to the Allied fleet. "Target every system on the divine retribution simultaneously. Overload their defenses." The combined fleet opened fire with everything they had. Quantum torpedoes and antimatter beams struck the god ship from every direction, while energy weapons from a dozen different species added to the barrage. The divine retribution's shields flared and sparked under the massive assault. Morrison monitored the sensor readings as the enemy ship's systems began to overload. "Captain, their dimensional manipulation array is destabilizing. The reality shredder cannot fire while their space-time controls are fluctuating." Phase 2, Collins ordered. The USS Valiant launched boarding pods directly at the divine retribution's hull. Morrison led the assault team wearing advanced combat armor and carrying weapons designed specifically to fight the ethereals. If Dr. Brooks was correct, then the beings inside the godship were biological creatures that could be killed. The boarding pods punched through the divine retribution's hull, and Morrison found himself inside a vessel unlike anything he had ever imagined. The corridors were vast spaces filled with energy that seemed to flow like liquid light. Strange symbols covered the walls, and the air itself hummed with power. "Stay together and watch for defensive systems," Morrison ordered his team. "Remember, these beings are mortal no matter how they appear." They fought their way through automated defenses and energy barriers toward the ship's core. The ethereal technology was impressive, but it followed predictable patterns. Every system had a weakness, and every defense could be overcome with enough determination. Morrison's team reached the central chamber to find War Hierarch Velnoxus waiting for them. But now he was not the towering energy being from the transmissions. He stood barely 8 feet tall, and his glowing form was clearly some kind of technological suit rather than natural energy. "So, the insects have found their way to the heart of divinity," Velnoxus said. His voice was still powerful, but Morrison could hear the fear underneath the arrogance. "You think your primitive weapons can harm a god?" "You are not a god," Morrison replied as he raised his weapon. "You are just another tyrant with advanced technology, and tyrants can be killed." The final confrontation was brief, but decisive. Velnoxus fought with energy weapons and spatial manipulation, but Morrison's team had trained for exactly this scenario. Human tactics and determination proved superior to ancient arrogance, and the war hierarch fell to weapons wielded by free people. As Velnoxus died, his technological suit failed and revealed his true form. He was a tall, thin creature with pale skin and multiple eyes, but he was clearly biological. The god who had terrorized the galaxy for millennia was just another mortal being who had forgotten that power did not make him divine. Morrison activated his communication system to broadcast to the entire galaxy. War Hierarch Vel Noxus is dead. The divine retribution is under human control. The age of false gods has ended. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the galaxy, enslaved species rose up against their ethereal masters. The illusion of divine invincibility had been shattered, and the Dominion began to collapse as rebellion spread from system to system. The remaining ethereal ships fled the Sol system as their crews realized that their war hierarch was dead. Without their leader, and with their flagship captured, they had no hope of completing their mission. The god fleet that had come to destroy humanity retreated in defeat. Morrison stood on the bridge of the captured divine retribution and watched as Earth appeared on the main viewing screen. The planet looked peaceful and beautiful after the violence of battle. Humanity had faced beings who claimed to be gods and proven that no one had the right to rule over others without their consent. Captain, we are receiving transmissions from over 1,000 worlds, reported the communication officer. They all want to send delegations to Earth. They are calling us the God Killers who freed the galaxy. Morrison smiled as he thought about the future. Humanity would not become the new rulers of the galaxy. They would help other species build a civilization based on freedom and cooperation rather than fear and domination. The age of tyranny was ending, and the age of free peoples had begun. 3 months after the fall of War Hierarch Vel Noxus, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have predicted. Morrison stood in the observation deck of the captured divine retribution as it orbited Earth and watched endless streams of ships arriving from across known space. Every day brought new delegations from worlds that had been enslaved by the ethereal dominion for generations. Dr. Nina Brooks had been studying the god ship's technology, and her discoveries were reshaping humanity's understanding of the universe. She joined Morrison at the viewing window with a datapad full of her latest findings. The ethereals were not as ancient as they claimed, she said. Based on their historical records, they only achieved interstellar travel about 12,000 years ago. They conquered their first alien world through superior technology and then built their divine mythology to control other species. Morrison nodded as he watched a massive transport ship from the Kethran system dock with the orbital station. The Kethran had been the first species to rebel after hearing of Vel Noxus's death, and their revolution had inspired dozens of other worlds to throw off ethereal rule. How many species were under their control? Morrison asked. Over 800. Different civilizations across nearly 3,000 star systems, Brooks replied. Most of them had been enslaved for so long that they had forgotten their own history. The ethereals deliberately destroyed records of pre-conquest cultures to make their subjects more dependent. Captain Collins joined them with Admiral Carter, who had come aboard to oversee the diplomatic meetings. The Admiral looked tired but satisfied as she carried reports from the various delegations that were arriving daily. The Zephyrian Commonwealth wants to rebuild their ancient capital world, Carter said. They are asking for human engineers to help design new cities. The Vortaki Collective is requesting our quantum communication technology so they can reunite their scattered colonies. Morrison felt a surge of pride as he listened to the requests. Humanity was being asked to share their knowledge freely rather than demanding tribute or worship. It was exactly the opposite of how the ethereals had ruled their empire. What about the remaining ethereal forces? Collins asked. Scattered and leaderless, Carter replied. Most of their fleet commanders have retreated to the core worlds near the galactic center. A few groups are still trying to maintain control over remote systems, but they face constant rebellions. Without their divine mythology to cow their subjects, they are just another species with advanced technology. Dr. Brooks activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas still under ethereal control, while green regions indicated liberated worlds. The green areas were spreading rapidly as more species gained their freedom. The most interesting development is here in the Andorian sector, Brooks said, pointing to a cluster of stars. 5 different species have formed a mutual defense alliance. They are calling it the Free Worlds Coalition, and they want to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. Morrison studied the display and saw dozens of similar alliances forming across the galaxy. Species that had been kept apart by their ethereal masters were now working together to rebuild their civilizations. It was exactly what humanity had hoped would happen. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster approached with a priority message. "Captain, we are receiving a transmission from the Outer Rim. A human exploration vessel has made contact with a group of ethereal refugees who want to surrender." Collins raised an eyebrow at the unexpected news. "Refugees?" "Yes, sir," Foster replied. "Apparently not all ethereals supported the Dominion's policies. This group has been in hiding for centuries, waiting for an opportunity to overthrow the ruling class. They want to meet with human representatives." Morrison exchanged glances with Brooks and Carter. The idea that there might be ethereals who opposed their own empire was surprising, but it made sense. No species was completely unified in their beliefs, and even the godlike beings must have had dissidents among their ranks. "Set up a meeting," Carter ordered, "but make sure it takes place in neutral space with full security precautions. We will listen to what they have to say, but we will not take any unnecessary risks." Over the following weeks, Morrison found himself involved in more diplomatic meetings than military operations. Representatives from liberated worlds came to Earth seeking everything from technological assistance to cultural exchange programs. The USS Valiant had been converted into a mobile embassy as Captain Collins traveled between star systems helping to establish new governments. The meeting with the ethereal refugees took place in an asteroid field on the edge of human space. Morrison accompanied Collins aboard a small diplomatic vessel, while the USS Valiant maintained a safe distance with weapons ready. The ethereal ship was unlike the massive god vessels they had fought at Earth. It was sleek and elegant with technology that seemed designed for exploration rather than conquest. When the airlock opened, Morrison was surprised to see ethereals without their energy suits. They were tall, graceful beings with pale skin and large eyes, but they looked nothing like the terrifying gods from the transmissions. Their leader introduced herself as Scholar Zara Lynn, and her voice was soft and musical rather than commanding. "We have waited 800 years for someone to challenge the Dominion," she said. "My people were scientists and philosophers before the warrior class seized control of our civilization. We opposed their expansion, but we were forced into exile when we refused to participate in their conquests." Collins listened carefully as Zara Lynn explained how a minority of ethereals had been living in hidden colonies while their species ruled the galaxy through fear. These exiles had preserved the true history of their civilization, including records of the peaceful societies they had destroyed. "We want to help rebuild what our people destroyed," Zara Lynn continued. "We have knowledge of ethereal technology that could benefit all species. But we understand if you do not trust us after what the Dominion did." Morrison found himself impressed by the scholar's sincerity. These ethereals seemed genuinely remorseful about their species' actions and eager to make amends. After hours of discussion, Collins agreed to establish a probationary relationship with the refugee group. As they returned to Earth, Morrison reflected on how much the galaxy had changed since the USS Defiance first received that terrifying transmission. The beings who had claimed to be gods had been revealed as mortals, and their empire of fear was crumbling. In its place, a new civilization was emerging based on cooperation rather than domination. Humanity had proven that even the mightiest tyrants could be defeated by free people working together. The age of false gods was truly over, and the age of liberation had begun. 1 year after the liberation of the galaxy, Morrison found himself standing in the newly constructed council chamber on the space station that orbited Earth. Representatives from over 200 species filled the massive hall as they worked. to establish the foundation of a new galactic civilization. The scene would have been impossible to imagine when the USS Defiance first encountered the ethereal transmission. Dr. Nina Brooks had been elected as Earth's chief scientific advisor to the Galactic Liberation Council. She stood at the central podium presenting her latest research on ethereal technology that was being shared freely among all member species. The dimensional manipulation arrays can be modified for peaceful purposes, she explained to the assembled delegates. Instead of weapons that tear holes in space, we can create stable gateways that allow instant travel between star systems. The same technology that was used to enforce tyranny can now connect free worlds. Morrison watched as representatives from dozens of species asked questions and offered their own technological contributions. The Kethron had developed advanced mining techniques that could extract resources without damaging planetary environments. The Vortaki possessed medical knowledge that could extend the lifespans of biological species. The Zephyrians had created art forms that could be appreciated by beings with completely different sensory systems. Captain Collins approached Morrison, with Admiral Carter and Scholar Zara Lynn, who had become an unofficial ambassador for the ethereal refugees. The unlikely alliance between humans and reformed ethereals had proven crucial in understanding the advanced technology left behind by the Dominion. The integration process is proceeding better than we hoped, Carter said. 43 former Dominion worlds have joined the Liberation Council and more are requesting membership every week. The transition to democratic government has been surprisingly smooth. Morrison nodded as he watched a group of young beings from different species working together on a joint project. Children who had been born into slavery were now learning to think for themselves and build relationships across species lines. It was perhaps the most hopeful sight in the entire galaxy. "What about the remaining ethereal holdouts?" Morrison asked. Zara Lynn spoke with sadness in her voice. "The warrior class has retreated to the core worlds, and they are trying to maintain control through increasingly desperate measures. They have declared my people to be traitors, and they have threatened to destroy any world that aids the Liberation Council." Collins studied a holographic map that showed the current political situation. Green areas marked liberated worlds, while red zones indicated territories still under ethereal control. Yellow regions showed contested systems where fighting was still ongoing. They control less than 10% of their former territory, Collins observed. But those core worlds contain some of their most advanced weapons and manufacturing facilities. They could still pose a significant threat if they decide to launch a final offensive. Dr. Brooks joined the conversation with a data pad full of intelligence reports. "Our deep space reconnaissance suggests they are building something in the Nexus system. Energy readings indicate massive construction projects, but we cannot determine what they are creating." Morrison felt a familiar chill as he remembered the reality-shredding weapons that the ethereals had used at Earth. If they were developing new superweapons, then the liberation of the galaxy might still be in jeopardy. "We need more information," Admiral Carter said. "I am authorizing a reconnaissance mission to the Nexus system. The USS Valiant will lead a small task force to investigate what the ethereals are building." Over the following weeks, Morrison found himself back in space aboard the modified godship Divine Retribution, which had been renamed the Unity. The vessel now served as a mobile headquarters for Liberation Council operations, and its crew included beings from over 30 different species working together. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster had been promoted to head of intelligence operations, and he briefed Morrison on the latest developments as they approached the Nexus system. Long-range sensors confirm massive energy signatures, but the ethereals have deployed some kind of stealth field that blocks detailed scans. Morrison studied the sensor readings and felt his unease growing. The ethereals were clearly planning something significant, and their history suggested it would not be peaceful. "What about our allies in the region?" "The Andorian coalition has reported increased ethereal patrol activity, but no direct attacks," Foster replied. It seems like they are focusing all their resources on whatever they are building rather than trying to reclaim lost territory. Captain Collins called the senior staff together as they reached the edge of the Nexus system. The tactical display showed a heavily fortified star system with energy barriers that prevented sensor penetration beyond the outer planets. Intelligence suggests the Ethereals are constructing some kind of superweapon that could threaten the entire Liberation Council, Collins explained. Our mission is to gather information and, if possible, prevent them from completing their project. Dr. Brooks studied the energy readings with growing concern. Captain, the power signatures are enormous. If they are building a weapon, it could have the capability to destroy entire star systems from thousands of light years away. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had led the fight to liberate the galaxy from ethereal tyranny, but the war was far from over. The remaining God wannabes were planning one final attempt to reclaim their empire, and millions of free beings were depending on the Liberation Council to stop them. All ships prepare for stealth approach, Collins ordered. We go in quietly and gather as much intelligence as possible. If we are detected, we retreat immediately and report back to the Council, as the Unity led the reconnaissance. Fleet toward the heart of the Nexus system, Morrison reflected on how far they had all come. A year ago, he had been a simple exploration captain who had never encountered alien life. Now, he was helping to coordinate the defense of hundreds of worlds against beings who still claimed divine authority. The liberation of the galaxy had been just the beginning. Building a new civilization based on freedom and cooperation would be the work of generations. But Morrison was confident that free people working together could overcome any challenge, including the desperate schemes of fallen gods who refused to accept that their age of tyranny was over. The final confrontation with the ethereal dominion was approaching, and the fate of the galaxy would be decided in the coming days. The reconnaissance fleet crept through the outer reaches of the Nexus system, using every stealth technology that the Liberation Council had developed. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching as their sensors gradually penetrated the ethereal defense networks. What they discovered made his blood run cold. At the heart of the system, the Ethereals had constructed a massive space station that dwarfed even their largest god ships. The structure was over 2,000 kilometers across, and energy readings suggested it was drawing power directly from the system's star. Dr. Nina Brooks worked frantically at her station, trying to analyze the readings. "Captain, this is beyond anything we have encountered before," she reported with fear in her voice. "The energy output is equivalent to the total power generation of 100 worlds. If they have weaponized this technology, it could threaten the entire galaxy." Captain Collins studied the tactical display showing the enormous station surrounded by the remnants of the ethereal fleet. Dozens of god ships provided defense, while construction drones continued working on the station's outer sections. The project was clearly nearing completion. Scholar Zara Lynn examined the sensor data with growing horror. "This matches descriptions from our oldest records. The warrior class attempted to build such a weapon during our civil war 8 centuries ago. We thought the plans had been destroyed." Morrison felt a chill as he realized the implications. "What kind of weapon are we looking at?" "A reality anchor," Zara Lynn replied. "It would create a field of absolute order that suppresses free will across vast distances. Any being caught within its influence would be compelled to obey ethereal commands. They could reclaim their empire without firing a single shot." Lieutenant Commander Foster monitored long-range communications as reports came in from across the galaxy. "Captain, we are receiving distress signals from the outer colonies. Several worlds report that their populations have suddenly stopped all independent activity. Everyone is just standing motionless waiting for orders." Collins activated the emergency communication system to contact Admiral Carter on Earth. "Admiral, the Ethereals have deployed some kind of mind control weapon. We need to evacuate the outer systems immediately." Carter's image appeared on the screen, and Morrison could see the strain in her face. "Captain, the weapon's effects are spreading faster than our evacuation ships can move. We estimate it will reach Earth within 72 hours, unless we can find a way to stop it." Morrison looked around the bridge and saw his own determination reflected in the faces of his diverse crew. Beings from dozens of species had worked together to free the galaxy from tyranny, and they would not surrender their hard-won freedom to a weapon that stole free will itself. "We need to destroy that station," Morrison said. Collins nodded grimly. "Agreed, but it is protected by energy shields that our weapons cannot penetrate. We would need to get inside the defensive perimeter, and that means fighting through the entire ethereal fleet." Dr. Brooks studied the station's design, and suddenly her eyes lit up with inspiration. "Captain, the station is drawing power directly from the star through massive collection arrays. If we could overload those systems, the resulting feedback might destroy the entire structure." Morrison felt hope rising in his chest. "How do we overload a stellar energy collector?" "We ram it with a ship carrying an unstable antimatter reactor," Brooks replied. "The explosion would disrupt the power flow and cause a cascade failure throughout the station." The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what she was suggesting. It would be a suicide mission with no possibility of escape. The ship that made the attack run would be vaporized along with everyone aboard. Collins did not hesitate. "Prepare the Unity for the attack run. All other ships will provide covering. Fire and evacuate any survivors they can find. Sir, with respect, that is not your decision to make," Morrison said. "This is my mission and my responsibility." Before Collins could respond, Scholar Zara Lynn stepped forward. "Neither of you understands the significance of this moment. My people brought this evil into the galaxy, and we must be the ones to end it. The Unity will make the attack, but I will pilot it alone." Morrison started to object, but Zara Lynn held up her hand. "I am the last surviving member of the original resistance movement that opposed the Dominion. For 800 years I have lived with the guilt of my people's crimes. Let me die knowing that I helped free the galaxy from our tyranny." The evacuation of the Unity proceeded quickly as the crew transferred to other ships in the fleet. Morrison was among the last to leave, and he shook hands with Zara Lynn before entering the transport pod. "Thank you for showing us that redemption is possible," he said. Zara Lynn smiled sadly. "Thank you for showing us that free will is worth any sacrifice." The Liberation Council fleet attacked the ethereal defenses with everything they had, while the Unity began its final approach to the stellar collection array. Enemy godships swarmed around the lone vessel, but Zara Lynn flew with the skill of someone who had nothing left to lose. Morrison watched from the bridge of Captain Collins' ship as the Unity penetrated the station's inner defenses. Ethereal weapons tore at its hull, but the ship continued toward its target. At the last moment, Zara Lynn transmitted a message to the entire galaxy. "To all free beings everywhere, remember that the greatest tyranny is the one that steals your ability to choose. Never surrender your freedom to anyone who claims the right to rule over you." The Unity struck the stellar collection array and vanished in an explosion of pure energy. The feedback cascade traveled through the reality anchor's power systems, and the massive station began tearing itself apart. The weapon that would have enslaved the galaxy died with the heroic ethereal who had devoted her life to freedom. The remaining ethereal fleet scattered as their final hope for reclaiming their empire was destroyed. Without their reality anchor, they were just another species with advanced technology, and their age of domination was truly over. Morrison stood in the observation deck of his new ship 6 months later, watching as construction crews from dozens of species worked together to build the first permanent headquarters for the Galactic Liberation Council. The station would orbit a neutral star system and serve as a meeting place for all free peoples. The galaxy was healing from 10,000 years of tyranny. Former slave worlds were rebuilding their civilizations, while new alliances formed between species that had been kept apart by their ethereal masters. Children were being born who would never know the fear of divine oppression. Admiral Carter joined Morrison at the viewing window with news from across the galaxy. The last ethereal holdout world has agreed to join the Liberation Council. They want to participate in the new civilization rather than cling to the old empire. Morrison nodded as he watched ships from hundreds of worlds arriving for the Council's first full assembly. Representatives of every known species would gather to establish the laws and principles that would guide their shared future. "What about the memorial for Scholar Zara Lynn?" Morrison asked. "It will be completed next month," Carter replied. "A monument to the ethereal who chose freedom over the false glory of her people's empire. She will be remembered as the being who proved that anyone can choose redemption no matter how dark their past." Morrison smiled as he thought about the future. Humanity had entered the galactic community as liberators rather than conquerors, and they had helped establish a civilization based on cooperation rather than domination. The age of false gods was over, and the age of free peoples would last forever. The stars belonged to everyone now, and they would shine on a galaxy where no being would ever again be forced to kneel before tyranny.